Hard Reuben. Oh my God.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15. Wow, 15 of Hard Reuben's Force-Fed Cafe. Today, my guest is singer, guitar player, and songwriter of Cleveland Thrashers, Destructor, Dave Overkill. It was a bit of a fluke that I found myself in touch with Dave. It had been at least 30 years since I'd heard the name or even a single note from this outfit. It was a random post on Instagram that brought Destructor back into my life, and with quite a wave of nostalgia and bittersweet memories. When I was a 17-year-old kid in London, Ontario, I had a burgeoning music addiction, and my regular vagrancy around the local mall, waiting to buy vinyl and tapes at every chance I got, was fed when new records would be released, and I would have to decide what I could afford and what I would have to wait for. Quite often, I'd have to go back to that what I have to wait for list. I remember specifically standing in the record store one day with another vagrant friend, finding two records that day, Destruction's Sentence of Death EP, and right behind, in the bin, Destructor, Maximum Destruction. Both albums had been out a little while at this point, and they both had similar covers with all the guys in bullet belts and studded leather. I chose Destruction's Sentence of Death that day, and the friend I was with chose Destructor. From that day on, Destructor and Destruction were both in my continuous rotation of records, which had exploded for me. Celtic Frost, Slayer, Nasty Savage, Exodus, Testament, Megadeth, Razor, Exciter, and now Destructor. That all changed when Destructor all but vanished from the musical landscape, temporary as it was, following the unfortunate murder of bassist Dave Holocaust. And that, my friends, was literally the last I heard of this promising band. Until a few days ago, when a post crossed my Instagram feed that sparked my attention, and within minutes I was suddenly and with great enthusiasm reacquainted with Destructor, a band who in my view had the talent and the chops to compete against the aforementioned bands, those we now consider some of the godfathers of thrash. We touch briefly on the post that brought Dave to my attention, but we don't dwell, and Dave shows his class by supporting the scene, regardless of someone throwing shade his way, without really getting the big picture. All sins forgiven. This, my friends, is Dave Overkill.
I was in British Columbia once on a business trip because I work in seafood, and we visited. I was in on the island, and we went and saw some salmon farms. It was really cool seeing like orca whale in the water and dolphins following you, and the city Vancouver I thought was really awesome, pretty diverse, and I had a great time when I was there. I always wanted to go back. Beautiful.
If you were on Vancouver Island checking out orcas and salmon farms, you were definitely in my neck of the woods.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm right up there.
What's the name of that main city? It's Campbell or something like that?
They're Campbell River.
Yeah, Campbell River. Yeah, that's where I stayed in a hotel there, and I was there by myself. Actually, I didn't know anybody. My work sent me up there, and so I was basically just wandering around the island by myself until I met up with the group of people that took us on a boat. Took us about 40 minutes or so to get to a Greek salmon farm.
Nice. I'm really glad you had some time for me, Dave. I was obviously, we connected over a little bit of an Instagram kerfuffle the other day, which I thought was hilarious. And the first thing I don't want to, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, but without totally trashing the kid, because he is a young guy just starting out, trying to get his act together and figure things out. And the one thing that I'll tell you, so I saw the post. I saw you posting a little bit of what he had to say to you, and I thought to myself, like, do you not have Google? Figure this out. I remember, I'm going to tell you right now, like, when I was a teenager and you guys were first coming out, I was living up in London, Ontario. So not too far, just, chuck it if you had
across the pond.
Across the pond. I mean, if it was a little pond, you could chuck a rock and hit us, but it was not a little pond. So, but I remember back in the day, there was a friend of mine, the way it was, right? You'd go and you'd buy records, and you didn't buy every record that came out. I had a friend of mine, and we would go to this little record store in the mall, and we would always buy different records. And I remember we
taking chances on stuff.
That's right. We'd buy different records, and I remember it was around the same time. I think they were released at different times, but just the way it worked out, we were looking at that Destruction EP where they're all like on the cover with bullet belts, and then we're looking at the Destructor record where you're all on the cover with bullet belts and that kind of similar kind of look, and we.
Yeah.
I actually bought the Destruction EP, and he bought the Destructor LP. And we went home and just listened to them both. And then it almost at a blink of an eye, you lost Dave Holocaust, and then you were gone. So I want to talk, if that's okay, I want to talk a little bit about basically your entire trajectory. Like you guys seemed, I've been listening to that first album, Maximum Destruction, quite a bit the last couple days, and I'm like, you guys were on the upward slope, like you were going to go somewhere.
We thought so. I mean, we actually had penned, we were entertaining a contract with Island Records, the same label Anthrax was on, and then Dave was murdered, and that summer we went through the murder trial and all this other stuff, and we just couldn't seem to get footing again, even though we got a bass player in the band, and the label was just like, all right, well, we're going to pass and we're going to sign Legs Diamond. And that's what happened with that whole scene. And then when that happened, it's like, fuck, we lost our record label, our record deal. Dave is gone. It's like a very tough hole to dig ourselves back out of at that time.
Okay, so Dave was murdered, but what was the situation around that? What was like? How did that happen?
We were actually having a New Year's Eve party, which we had a lot of parties at our rehearsal spot. Bands like Purgatory used to come by and hang out, and we'd go over to theirs, and it was kind of like a tight community. So we had a New Year's Eve party, and some guys that we knew, I knew one of the guys had picked up this guy that murdered Dave at some bar. They didn't know him from Adam, and they just were like befriended him and said, wanted to go to a party. The guy just became unruly, and Dave Iannica asked the guy to leave because he was like being disrespectful to Dave's fiance, and Dave escorted him out the door, and he was kind of like, yeah, come on, you and me, man, let's go outside, and Dave just kind of followed him, and in the time that he had gone out there, Dave, I guess, had gone upstairs and then gone back out to see if the guy had left, and he was still there, but he had a hunting knife in his car and just decided he was going to kill somebody that night. We didn't even know this guy never seen him before in our lives,
So just a real random act of violence. That's just messed up.
Yeah, super.
Yeah.
It made no sense whatsoever, but it's our first encounter with people that you can't trust, because we just thought, oh, everybody's fucking cool at the time, Dave was 23 years old when he was killed.
Wow. That's really awful. Let's back it up a little bit and talk. I wanted to talk about that a little bit, but I don't want to dwell on it too much. But let's back up a little bit to the formation of Destructor. You guys started out, you're considered by a lot to be part of that sort of second wave of thrash, but you guys started early, right?
We were actually Destructor in 1983, but we had this drummer, Don Payne, who didn't really like the direction of the stuff where we were going, and we ended up meeting Matt through the band Breaker, who said, hey, I got a drummer for you guys, and Ian Shipley, the bass player, brought him down to our practice spot. So once we met Matt, we realized this is the lineup that we need, and that's when we really decided, we had become Destructor, because we really found our sound because of his antics and his playing, and his approach was way different than what we had done before. So 1984, October was our very first show.
So how old were you at that time?
21.
Okay, so you'd been playing some music for a while at that point, just not as Destructor, and you had a little bit of experience under your belt.
Yeah, we all, Dave Iannica, Pat, Paul Warhead, the original bass player of Destructor, who actually helped write a lot of the first record, all went to high school and all graduated from the same high school in '82. So we played in garage bands, between us, various different lineups and different people. So we'd grown up learning to play and listening to heavy metal and discovering new bands all at that time.
What were your big influences? You played like Priest and and Uriah Heep and that sort of stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, not far off. We actually, at our high school in 12th grade, there was senior talent night. And other people that were in high school had bands and stuff, and like one band, played like Blue Oyster Cult, Burning for You, but we were the only guys that were like the real metal dudes in the high school, and we asked to audition, and they reluctantly said yes, but it was Paul Warhead, Greg Canis on drums, and Pat and myself. We didn't have a bass player. We had 3 guitars and drums, and nobody was a singer at the time. And we played Silver and Gold by Tigers and Pantang, Swords and Tequila, and what else did we play? I think we played Ides of March by Iron Maiden and Lean and Mean by the Boys. Needless to say that we didn't get asked to play Senior Talent Night, but that was the coolest thing we thought of, when we were in high school. We're in the bathroom putting on our leather and different stuff and getting up there on the stage and jamming in the little hall there or whatever, playing heavy metal. And we just thought, here's our revenge on fucking high school,
I remember when that was important.
Yeah.
You're like it's like it was yesterday. I remember those feelings in high school of like, I'm going to show you assholes, and then you get to the point where
Totally.
you can show those assholes, and you're like, I don't care about those guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Okay, so you guys, you get together with that lineup in like '83. You got a couple years. You do a demo, and then you bump into this guy who has a label he's started up.
Right. Bill had just started Auburn Records. I think, what was the first band that came out? I think it was Shock Paris, maybe, and we were the second one. But our first show, we opened up for a band called the Manimals, which they're kind of like a cross between the Misfits and Kiss.
Okay.
And after we played our first show, Bill came up to us, and nobody at that time was doing anything like what we were doing in our city, And he came up and said, "Hey, you guys want to make a record?" And we were like, "Fuck, hell yeah, this is great." It started off as he offered to do an EP, which actually, I think in a Kerrang magazine or Metal Forces, he'd taken out an ad for Pounding Evil EP right next to a Black Death ad. And that never happened because, we realized, or we had so many songs, and convinced Bill, we shouldn't just do an EP. Let's just record all the songs. So we went in the studio in '85, in the summertime of '85, and then in December, the Maximum Destruction officially was released.
Cool. So when you, I've got a couple of different perspectives on what it means when somebody starts up a record label. Did he have some money he was putting into this? Was this like he was doing this for real, or is this there's a lot of folks that do put records out, myself included, back in the '90s, where it was like, I'm just doing it off the side of my desk. I'm scrounging the money together to put the release out and skimping on artwork and that sort of thing. So did he have some funds, or was he just kind of like, I'm going to try and help you guys and maybe I'll get something out of it too?
The scenario with Bill was, and he still is, he's been a radio DJ on a college station, John Carroll University. And him and a couple, I think it was one other guy, decided they were going to put out compilations. So they put out that Cleveland Metal Comp, and they had done like one other thing. And Bill thought, this is great. I'd like to keep on doing this. And he basically just took out a loan to get the first records going, and just, sort of generating the money, because he had a passion for, I want to promote bands, and I want to, I'm playing it on the radio. I want to put out a record for these guys.
Cool. He made a real investment in that. That was good. Probably would have been a good idea when I did it.
and no doubt. And on his radar at the time, Breaker had been playing shows, and Black Death had been playing shows before Destructor got a chance to do our first show. And actually, Exciter played downstairs at the pop shop at Agora, and we were kind of bummed out because we're like, fuck, this would be a great opportunity for us to play. And Shock Paris opened up for them. But Bill had a bunch of different bands in Cleveland to choose from, because there was actually a bunch of bands that coming out of the woodwork at the time, and they were all a little bit different from each other. Breaker, Shock Paris, Purgatory, Black Death, Destructor, and those were just some of the names that I can pull off the top of my head, but there was all kinds of different bands at the time.
So you put out Maximum Destruction, and I found a copy. I didn't buy the copy, unfortunately. My buddy did. I wonder if he still has it. Clearly, he had sorted out some kind of distribution, because I was up in London, Ontario. So did Auburn Records have a bit of a distribution deal with somebody where it was your stuff was getting out to people?
He did. He was actually an employee of Warner Brother Records at the time. He was working in the office, and sort of just used that experience on how to network and how to get things out, and met a couple people that, through pen paling and word of mouth, that you can get your records over here, get your records over there, and get some distribution going. But it was still a very ground level. It wasn't all over the United States. We're fortunate enough to had our records in Canada and some other places, but it was pretty regional.
Yeah. Did you have an opportunity to? You mentioned missing an opportunity to open up for or play with Exciter, but did you get an opportunity to do some touring and to connect with some bands and make some relationships that was gonna eventually you got under the sights of Island Records? So there must have been some activity that brought you there, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we had a couple opportunities doing some shows out of town. We were always like the opener, so we opened up for Metal Church in Chicago, and a lot of bands that would come through town. We had the opportunity to play with them as well. So we opened up for Megadeth, and we played with Nasty Savage and Impaler. There was a number of the bands that were just like doing some tours at the time, and we were the perfect fit here in Cleveland to be the opening band for those guys. And that's basically how we sort of created our name, and people got a chance to start to see us play. And we started to stretch out, play New York, play Chicago, and got back in the studio to start recording another record. And that's when it all kind of came to a screeching halt.
So you'd gone back into the studio in 87 ish,
yeah.
Right? Worked out some tunes, and so Dave was murdered in 1988. So you had that demo that you just sort of, it was there, but you got a new bass player. Did you re-record some stuff trying to work towards the new record, or?
Well, we started recording what was going to be our second record, Decibel Casualties, in 87. And we hadn't gotten that many tracks done. And there was like one instance that the tape ran out while we were playing Shedding of Blood and Tears. And so we only had a couple of things that when we went back to that we could use, because, there wasn't any of Dave's bass playing on it. Matt's drumming, had some flaws and stuff. So we were just in the embryonic stages of recording that record. That kind of got shelved, obviously, when, after Dave was killed. So before Brooke came from Chicago to join the band, we had gone into Breaker's practice spot to record that 1988 demo. And that's how that came about, because we were like, all right, well, we need to, keep pumping out some songs here. And this is the only way to do it, because we can't get back in the studio and we can't really repair some of that stuff or continue with some of that stuff, because it just ended up open-ended.
Hey gang, you feeling sluggish? Trying to find some energy for the gym, or wishing you could shed a few pounds and are struggling to find just the thing to help you? Then check out High on Life Superfoods. High on Life is the leading provider of hemp-based, nutrient-rich supplements intended to instill optimal health to those who wish to perform at the next level. Listen, I'm not just talking here. I use High on Life products myself. LIT is an amazing hemp-based, vegan, raw food blend that helps reset your body's nutrient balance and kickstarts your metabolism to get you going through the day. Use it as a shake, in a smoothie, or try my favorite. Mix it up with some cold coconut milk and cocoa, and voila, LIT ice cream. Do your body a favor, everyone. Go to highonlifesuperfoods.com and enter the code ForceFed10 on checkout to receive 10% off your order. But don't just listen to me. High on Life is used by some of your favorite bands: Suffocation, Trivium, Dark Angel, Testament, Body Count, and many more. These guys know what it means to need to keep up their metal pace. Try it and you will see the difference. I have. highonlifesuperfoods.com. Get it. So around that time, you had interest from Island Records. You'd had some preliminary discussions with them. Had you signed anything at that time, or you were just still?
We had not signed anything, but the New Year's Eve party that we're having was like our celebration. Like, yeah, we're getting signed to this label, and it was going to get penned at the beginning of the new year, and we had already started recording some of the stuff. So our intent was to sign the label and finish the record in 1988, and they were the ones that were going to put it out. It was a 7-year, 7-album contract type of deal that, it's pretty standard back in the day.
Okay, New Year's Eve party happens, and it really does, like, everything screams to a halt. You have to get involved in the trial and the court case, and Island Records has distanced themselves and backed off, saying, no, you got to deal with your stuff. But you actually don't fold as a band for a few years yet, right? So you still got your relationship with Auburn.
We did, but Brooke, in all fairness to Brooke, it wasn't the greatest time for him. He's a really great guy. He ended up joining Breaker and playing bass and Breaker for years after that. He had moved from Chicago to Cleveland to join Destructor. And, all of a sudden we started going through the trial and all this other stuff. And so there wasn't a whole lot going on. And he felt very frustrated about that situation. So he joined Breaker, and then we ended up getting another bass player in the band in 1989. Then in 1990, he was short-lived. In 1990, we decided, let's give Paul Warhead a shot again. And Paul, he was a high school friend, helped write a lot of Maximum Destruction, but he got into some shit that just took him away from music. He ended up being one of those guys that had so much potential, but couldn't get out of his own way. So we decided to give him another shot in 1990, and that didn't last very long because he really hadn't changed any of his habits and all of that. So when Paul left, when we asked Paul to leave the band, Matt decided he was going to take a leave of absence. So it was just Pat and I for a couple of years, just basically hanging out at the practice spot, working on some songs and not really having a band to play with. And we ended up finding two other musicians, Tim Green and Eric Beers, that played with us just for, I think we did one show. We opened up for Overkill, and that was in 1992. And then that sort of fizzled out because these guys, it just wasn't the same chemistry anymore, So 1992 was our very last show, and then it wasn't until 1998 or 1999 we had some interest from Europe saying, what's up with Destructor? Why don't you guys get back together again? And we realized, shit, people really cared. In the 90s in the United States, heavy metal was all but dead. You had some bands carrying on, but it wasn't like it was in the 80s. The golden era had ended. So we thought, this is it. It's over with. And we realized the rest of the world was still loving heavy metal and really digging a lot of these 80s bands from around the United States and trying to get these bands to come and play Europe. And so that was like a really good opportunity for us to reunite. And then we decided Decibel Casualties was left unfinished, so let's re-record all of those songs, and that's what ended up being the Back in Bondage release. And so that was just a way of like, all right, we got to finish what we started here and put this to bed, and we recorded that. And that sat for years. Bill didn't want to do anything with it, which was very disappointing. It was recorded in 1991, and we didn't get a chance to release it until like 3 years ago because Bill was sitting idle on it.
And that is unfortunate, but you spoke to this that metal in North America really had taken a shit kicking, and thank God for Europe keeping it all alive, because if you look at metal, you've got all these bands that were around in the 80s, and they might not have been around for us in North America in the 90s, but I'm thinking of Creator, I'm thinking of Destruction, which we talked about briefly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of metal that we might not have been hearing it over here, but they were still making records, and they were still touring, and they were still making a living. And it's really unfortunate that divide was created between on the Atlantic Ocean, basically. So it's not really a surprise that a guy who's investing in bands is afraid to put out a record or sits on a record for years that it doesn't look like anybody's going to buy it. So it's kind of shitty, but that's business
right.
too, right?
And here's the scenario behind that. We got Jamie in the band, and we released Sonic Bullet, and so basically we had like a brand new beginning, and we didn't want to just release some old stuff. We wanted to be able to show, all right, we're a current band, we're happening, instead of bands, just at the time when they didn't have any new material, resting on their laurels and re-releasing old stuff. So that kind of was the strategy behind that. But at some point we're like, Bill, all right, after Sonic Bullet, you need to release this, and we can keep moving on. But the theory was, let's make another new record and show that you guys still have songs. And so we released Forever and Leather. So that one always kind of kept getting pushed back onto the back burner for some legitimate reasons, but also it could have happened earlier. But in hindsight, I'm glad we did it when we did it, and it's finally out.
So you've got a few releases under your belt at this point. You've got Revigorated Band. I knew Maximum Destruction, and I, of course, have listened to that a few times over the last few days, and I was very, it was one of those things. It's like, I haven't heard this in years. I have not heard this probably in 30 years. And then I'm listening to it the last few days, and I'm like, fuck, this is a great record.
Thanks.
And so it's good to see that you eventually, I mean, and there's no shame in there's no shame in hanging up the leathers for a while and going about the business of life, and because a lot of people have had to do it. But it's great that you're you're back on stage and you're back in the studio and you're doing stuff, and you've got a band that's got some that's got some resemblance for you of that sort of like old electricity that you had. Let's chat a little bit, because this is one of the things that I do like to do with this podcast. Growing up, every band I ever came across and ever listened to, and this was the 80s, I think, there was this sort of belief, this idea that they were all rolling in money. You got a record out, you're a millionaire. Boom, done, just like that. Right? And I think
unless your band's like Poison or Bon Jovi that ended up, selling, or Skid Row sell 1 million records of your first release,
Sure, but at the time that was the dream, right? Everybody was like, I got to get that deal. I got to get the record, and then it's going to be gravy. But that's not the way it is. It's hard work. It's putting a lot of your own blood, sweat, and tears into it, and your own money, and it's sleeping in the van, and it's sleeping on the floor, it's sleeping on the couch. It's not sleeping in big fancy hotel rooms. You hear about all these stories of bands trashing hotel rooms, and it's like, man, you could be on a couch. So so one of the things I really like to talk about is what people actually do. You're a musician and you're an artist, but what do you actually do that enables you to be that musician and that artist? And you touched on it. You said that you work in seafood. So in that time, so you're 21 and you start up Destructor, and you're doing your thing. What are you doing to make, you're probably not just sitting around being Destructor all the time. You're not Dave Overkill 24/7. Sounds like you've got a family. And what have you done in that time?
So obviously every band back in the day, until you come to a point where, if you're lucky enough to get a record deal and get on tour, and you have some sort of sustainability financially and everything, everybody's got to work a job. I was in the restaurant business for years, and then I ended up getting into the seafood business. And so, what I do is I manage a plant that produces seafood and distributes it around the state of Ohio and surrounding states. But that's basically, the livelihood. And for any of these bands at this point, you're working your ass off trying to provide for your families and pay for mortgages and everything, and still try to come up with enough money so that you can pay for recording and get merchandise going. And merchandise, if it wasn't for that, nobody would be making any money, because any band that does shows, whether even if it's Nasty Savage nowadays, although they've been fortunate enough to go to South America and stuff, you get gigs that pay X amount of dollars, several $100s or something like that, and maybe some hotel rooms, and it basically just covers your travel and lodging expenses. But other than that, if you break even, it's golden.
Yeah. Did you catch that Anvil documentary?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. What a telling story, right? Like I talked to a bunch of people that don't understand bands and don't understand music, and they were like, they had some not kind things to say, but I'm like, you know what? These are guys that have a dream, and they're not giving up on it. And this is something that I think they should be super proud of. And Anvil are phenomenal. So it's that, and you can translate their story, like their story in various degrees is thousands of other musicians and bands. I'm glad when bands, like you mentioned Nasty Savage being able to go to South America, and then you've got Razor, which plays the occasional North American show, but they go to festivals in Europe, and that's how they're keeping it alive. And that's fantastic. Yeah. And there's a lot of bands that do that. And so I'm wondering, is that in your future? Is that what you're sort of trying to drive Destructor towards? Like, you might not capture that sort of 80s glory in North America and be able to do this as your full-time job, but this is your art. So is this something you're aiming towards? Like, let's see if we can get some shows in Europe and do some festivals, or let's go to South America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, especially in Asia, South America, Mexico, there's all kinds of new younger fans that are rediscovering or for the first time discovering this kind of music. And so it's created an awesome opportunity for bands that are able to still function. You know, we've been fortunate enough. We played Europe a number of times. We played Headbangers Open Air. We played Keep It True. We played Bang Your Head. Played on the wet stage at Wacken. Almost all of those shows we had to pay our airfare to get over there. And then maybe we get like 500 euros for doing the show, but it cost us a shitload of money just to, it's like, all right, we got a slot for you guys if you can get over here kind of thing. And that's the way it is with a lot of bands. You try nowadays to not accept any gigs unless they're going to pay for your travel and your lodging. And if that's all it covers and you're able to sell your merch, then that's great. You know, I mean, that's actually a super winning deal right there. But we have yet to have the opportunity. And, you know, Jamie that played with Destructor for 10 years, he has Midnight, and Midnight is like doing really well right now. They're very successful. And Jarvis Night Demon is managing them, but they've had the opportunity to play from everywhere from New Zealand to Dubai to Colombia and doing some tours over in Europe. You know, Destructor, we're just kind of still plugging away and hoping that we can get recognized. And the only way to really do that is to keep new releases out and to stay current, because people forget. I mean, there's, like you said, there's thousands of other bands trying to get on these shows and do this stuff, and a lot of them are very good bands. So the ratio of bands to festivals is way too high, and not every festival wants to have a repeat. So, you know, we've been fortunate to play a couple festivals, but a lot of them over in Europe are like, well, you've already played here. Unless you're like a Jag Panzer or some other band, you know, you get one shot, you don't get 2 or 3 shots at the festival.
And this brings us to how I connected with you. I didn't get the gist. I saw your post about this. I don't want to out him because I think he's got a lot to learn, and I actually know some folks who know him, and the general consensus is, what a turkey. But it seems to me like you were reaching out and saying, hey, we might be interested. And he's like, who the hell are you?
Yeah. After all of that, I still posted on my Facebook page. I took a screenshot of the festival page and said, this looks like an interesting festival, because, you know, maybe he's not the guy to continue this, but it's great that that's happening. And I thought, wow, Vancouver Island, there's a heavy metal festival. What the fuck? That's crazy. I've been there before. I didn't even know there was like a possible scene that was there. And so I just reached out and on a public thread said, hey, you know, what does the band have to do to get on, be considered for this festival? I think was the actual wording. And he said, the lineup is full. That's all he said. And I was like, okay, I realize that's happening this year. I'm talking about the future. And that's when he said, well, if you, maybe if you're a band and you work hard enough and you create enough interest in stuff, that people will want to see you play. And I was just thinking, at that time, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Really? I mean, it's not like, you know, we're the greatest thing ever and we're just another band in the scene and stuff, but you're talking to somebody that's been doing this his whole entire fucking life and dedicated his life to this, and you're talking to me like I'm fucking fresh, wet behind the ears.
Yeah.
And so
17
then I sent him
and
a
you
personal
just
message.
Yeah, he's talking to you like
And I
you're
said,
17.
are you fucking kidding me? Right. I said, are you fucking kidding me? And he goes, no, man, I've seen you guys before. It's nothing special and kind of thing. And, you know, just because you're an old band doesn't mean anybody cares anymore. And I just thought to myself, that is not the approach that you should have if you're trying to bring fans to a festival. And I know it's a first off kind of thing and free. I don't know how he's making it happen, but I just had never encountered somebody putting on a show that was that disrespectful. It's all you can say is, yeah, hey, you know, we got, you know, plenty of other bands. We're not interested, but thank you for contacting me. But he was just an outright fucking cock about it.
Yeah.
And so without, and I don't want to take the wind out of any sales of any festival because, and I even sent them the message. Regardless, I think you're, being kind of a dick here, but I'm still going to forget my wording, but support your festival because one thing that I realize is there's a bunch of great new young bands, Bewitcher and Enforcers and Lady Beasts and stuff like that. And that's the future of heavy metal. It doesn't end with the Judas Priests and the Destructors and the Creators and stuff like that. I mean, they're if we want to see metal in the future, we need to support it on all levels. And that's, one of the things that I try to do is support younger bands and support festivals, even if they're not going to give us a shot or logistically, I'm thinking, Vancouver, there's no way they'd be able to fucking pay for us to even half of our expenses to come out there to play. But I was just showing some interest in it, and I got a rude response, and I just was like, what the fuck? I can't even believe this guy.
Yeah, that just shows his youth, I think. It just really points out that he's sort of in his own little bubble. You know what? When I was 17, if somebody from the Rolling Stones, and I'm not kidding, if somebody from the Rolling Stones had said, "Hey, we want to come to your town and can you help us out, or do you want to put us on?" I would have been like, "Fuck you, old man."
Right.
But now it's like all the best bands have dudes in their 40s and 50s. I'm not
older ones. Look at bands like Satan and stuff. They still have a life, and I totally understand that and respect that. I just thought that his tact could have been way different.
Yeah, for sure. But he's also, he's also reached out to some other old bands to try and get them on. So it's kind of a weird attitude that he would throw at you. So anyway, we've got you on this podcast, and that's exciting because there's this thing called Google, and I'm hoping that people will check you out. You've got a great history of albums, not a great history of dealing with the shit that comes your way. It's unfortunate that happened to you, but you've got you're reinvigorated. You've got recent material. You look like you found the right niche, the right path to be on as a band, so that you can continue to do
Right.
what you love and put some music out and have an impact. And I, for one, am excited by that for you. And I'm excited that I got to have you on this podcast, because up until not too long ago, because I'm in a bubble, I'm on Vancouver Island, and not a lot happens here. We watch the whales go by and we enjoy our lives. I did not know Destructor was still a band until a few days ago, and when I did, and it's funny because I've actually been following you on Instagram, but mostly because I liked your posts, not necessarily because I knew you were Dave Overkill from Destructor, and
Right.
that to me is the beauty of social media. I mean, there's a lot of bullshit that comes with social media, but I love that it makes the world a smaller place, and it brought you and me into each other's bubble so we could have this conversation, and hopefully people will check out Destructor and get invigorated by it and enjoy what it is, which is just some amazing heavy metal.
Thanks, Kev. I appreciate that. And we're at the point now where we're older guys, but we've written some really good songs. We're going in the studio to record the new Destructor record, and whatever piece of the pie that we can still have and show that we've got some music. My philosophy is not what we're going to have, what we're going to receive as a reward now or anything. It's what we're going to leave behind for future generations, and that's the whole reason why we do it. And I have a band that I created called Vulgar Devils. That's more dirty rock, and Pure Rock Records from Pure Steel, their division, released that, and we're recording another record this summer as well. So I got 2 records we're recording, and yeah, we are very current and very active, and we're just hoping to have the opportunity to still be invited to play some key shows and play cities where people are interested in seeing us, and that's not something that every band from our era has the luxury or the blessing of, I guess. I don't know, but we're thankful for that, and we just we're humble, and we're just so glad that we're able to still do things. We're healthy enough to do it, and I've got tons of great ideas, and they've never fallen short. I got more ideas for more records than I have time for, and that's probably a good problem to have.
That I'd say that's a great problem to have. Do you record? Have you jumped on modern times and you sit at home and record some stuff, or your jam space, or do you still go out to a full blown studio to do your work?
Not so much anymore, because there's not a whole lot of like full blown studios with the home recording and a lot of this other stuff. The trends now are there's a lot of smaller studios and people doing recordings in their basement, and so Nick, the guitar player from Wretch, who's also my songwriting partner and guitar player in Destructor, had built a studio in his basement. And so the next Destructor record we're going to record in his basement. He recorded the last 2 Wretch records there. And then I have some friends in Europe, and I send it off. And Michael Cush is the guy's name. He's a great musician and a great producer and engineer. And so he's basically going to be the guy that produces this stuff, but we're going to record it locally in a modest setting. But fortunately nowadays, if you have good microphone placement and you have somebody that knows how to work the equipment and the software, you're able to get a really good fucking recording on a much lower level than having to go into this studio and spend $20,000 to record a record, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So you've got a few albums out. Where can people find those?
Well, I signed with Hell's Headbangers, and so I think the next Destructor record will be Hell's Headbangers, and the Vulgar Devils will be Kingdom Records, which is owned by Hell's Headbangers as well. And they have excellent distribution and mail order and a website and stuff. So what we're able to do is we're able to reach a lot of different countries and stuff nowadays through mail order and some distribution. But distribution isn't like it used to be either, because just because you have a label that you sign with that has distribution doesn't mean that those records are moving. They end up in stores and end up in shelves, and then the returns end up coming back to the label when they don't sell. And it takes a lot of time to move product. So it's more of a do-it-yourself atmosphere nowadays, at least in our scene, and we're able to work that to the best of our advantage.
Excellent. So is Hell's Headbangers, are they putting stuff out on vinyl as well?
Oh yeah, they have a bunch of different bands on their label. They have Deceased, and they had Midnight, but I think Midnight has gone to Metal Blade now.
Okay.
But yes, they have a budget, and they have a gigantic warehouse and distribution. So the whole thing really nowadays is the bands, you pay for your own recordings and you get your own recordings done, and they're able to help you out a little bit. But the biggest way they're able to help you out is to actually get your product out through mail order and through distribution. And so we're fortunate enough to have these guys, who are a great team of people, actually live in the Northeast Ohio, in the Cleveland area, instead of working with the overseas label, which things always take forever. You contact somebody and then them contact you back, and then they get stuff mailed from Germany, product and stuff. The logistics are always a huge issue, but for us now, I'm working with guys locally that have all of that capability, that are, every step of the way we're working with stuff like Craig from Hell's Headbangers, that has his own little thing called Reaper Metals Productions. He put out the Maximum Destruction reissue, and every step of the way we worked on it. And I don't think any other label could have done the reissue honoring any of that old stuff, including the demos and including rare stuff and the packaging and all of that, because most people just want to dump shit and run.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm finding that that's definitely the case with a lot of the reissued vinyl, is that they're not going. You need to mix things a particular way for vinyl, and a lot of the companies are just basically hashing out the old CD digital and putting it on vinyl, and you can hear it. It just sounds horrible. It's good that you've got somebody who can do it right. I'm actually looking at their website right now, Dave. hellsheadbangers.com. If you want to go and find some Destructor, and there's quite a lot of awesome stuff there. Some T-shirts, there's some reissues, there's the Maximum Destruction, there's Forever in Leather, Decibel Casualties. They're all on vinyl, which I love.
Yeah.
So this is fantastic. That's great. They, were they the ones that did the? This is one of the I quite love. I'm doing an interview shortly with a friend of mine who runs a vinyl design company where they design all the packaging for LPs for record companies, and he's done some phenomenal layout. And I'm looking at a picture right now of the Nun Slaughter Destructor split.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. The way it you put them together and it creates a larger picture stuff. If any listeners check this out, man, that's amazing looking.
Eric Corbel from Hell's Headbangers did that layout, and we thought the same thing. That was brilliant. We've been friends with the guys from Nun Slaughter for years, and they're another band that evolved out of Cleveland and helped develop Hell's Headbangers Records. But I thought that was perfect to create 4 different releases, and if you collect them all, then it actually creates the bullet belt pentagram with the weapons and all that other stuff. I mean, it shows that that's one of the releases. It shows that who's ever working behind this stuff really digs this kind of stuff and is putting a lot of effort into it instead of just like throwing a CGI computer, Photoshop cover or whatever. And that's refreshing when you start working with people that are like-minded and really care about it and want to do it for the passion of it, not just for turning the dollar. Yeah, you want to sell product, but you want the fans to end up with something that they're going to really enjoy, and they're going to say, hey, I'm hanging on to this for a long time because this is something really cool.
It's obviously a labor of love. I'm just looking at it, and the quality of it looks incredible, and just the thinking of putting that together, like I think that's great. So that speaks really highly of them. So what's next for you?
We're going to we're still, as we mentioned before, trying to solicit festivals and other I think the 29th of this month, we're playing a festival in Pittsburgh called Metal Immortal Festival, which is put on by Deborah from Lady Beast, and it features us, Savage Master, Razor, Night Demon, Lady Beast, I think Iron Flame, Legendary. So there's a lot of bands on this festival that are current and working, and we're shooting for more festival shows and reaching back out and trying to play like the East Coast and Chicago, Detroit, certain areas. We've been fortunate enough to play Portland, Oregon, which was great. But the main goal right now for us this summer is to get 2 albums recorded, the Vulgar Devils record and the Destructor record, which tentatively is called Never Surrender, and get those out. And that in turn creates interest, and people see that and go, oh, wow. All right, we need to get these guys to play over here because they just had a new release and we really like it. And that's the key to rising above the masses of different bands and very good bands to actually create an opportunity for yourself.
Do you can you share your social media accounts with everybody so that they can check you out?
So on Instagram, I'm Dave Overkill. Facebook, Dave Just. And we have a Bandcamp page, which is Destructor on Bandcamp. Also, if you go to Reaper Metal Productions Bandcamp, you can find digital releases and all of the physical releases. So between the Bandcamp pages, we move merchandise, and people can always direct message me for personal mail order. And that's basically how we've been operating recently, is have a couple sites to do mail order. And then people are always welcome to contact me as well and say, hey, you got any of these shirts? You got any of these records? And I'd be glad to mail them out to people.
Awesome. I'm gonna get in touch with Hell's Headbangers myself in the near future. I'm thinking it's time to put some Destructor in my vinyl collection.
Evan, I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to do this podcast. It's always a pleasure for me. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dave. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I hope you make it to the West Coast soon, because I'll definitely want to head down to check you out.
Yeah, we got to get back out there. Last year, just to recap, Jarvis from Night Demon, I think it was his last installment of the Frost and Fire Festival, but I think he's planning on doing it in a different way in the future. But we were fortunate enough that he brought us there to Ventura, California, and that was our first time in California. So for us, it just showed, it's not over. There's plenty of opportunities. You just got to keep on working, networking, and trying hard, writing songs, and hope that people still like what you do. And that's the bottom line.
Perfect. Dave, thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to getting this online, and we will hopefully we'll chat again in the future.
Thanks for contacting me, brother. Man, I appreciate it.
You
Good
bet.
talk.
You have a great day.
You too.
That, my friends, was it. Episode 15 with Dave Overkill from Destructor. If you haven't heard them, check them out. If you like this or any other episode, please subscribe and leave a review. That's how we get better. And please follow me on Instagram at HardRubenOfficial. That's all for today, kids. Stay safe.